Nervous about the volatility of public markets? Looking to invest in Canadian real estate but not finding the right opportunities? Neighborhood Holdings may be an option. Nearly 10 years of consistent performance, Neighborhood aims to provide stable income while preserving invested capital, target net yield above 8%. At the heart of the strategy is Neighborhood's mortgage product portfolio of first position 100% residential mortgages across Canada with an average loan to value under 55%. Neighborhood partners with mortgage brokers and financial institutions who support quality borrowers in transition who may not currently qualify for traditional financing and have a temporary need for capital. Neighborhood's portfolio has no exposure to commercial, construction, or bare land properties, is geographically diversified across major urban and suburban centers in Canada. Check out the links in the description or visit neighborhoodholdings.com to view the offering memorandum for investors and advisors or to explore mortgage broker partnership opportunities. This is not advice. Please consult a professional advisor before investing a loonie in any of these investments. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this information discussed today is not intended to be or construed as investment advice. Please consult a professional advisor before putting a loonie in any of these financial markets.
The dirty secret is that no one's ever going to get paid back.
People have the shortest memories when it comes to investment.
We just got to get Keith into Bitcoin.
Hey, there's a bubble. Welcome back to Loonie Hour, episode 198. As always, joined with the three amigos, the boomer over in Halifax, Rich Diaz. We're on vacation time. Back in Portugal, the homeland.
Back to the homeland. Yeah, I'm in Portugal again. One of the perks of working for IceCap.
You don't work.
Earmuffs, Keith. Earmuffs. No, it's just that I get to travel a bit. I have a lot of family in Portugal, as some of you may know, and my aunt and uncle.
Rich, list them all. List all the names.
No, don't.
Okay, here we go. No, but it's great, and I love it. Like, the internet's great, and the beer is cheap. So, and I don't have to cook or clean anything. My aunt, no, it's just awesome here.
What is the Portuguese beer?
Oh, there's two. Well, there's many, but there's just two, which is Sagres, and there's Superbock.
How does that compare to a Canadian?
It's like a Molson export type.
Molson is terrible, by the way, if anyone's listening.
It's like but I'll tell you something. What's actually really cool here, because it's so hot all the time. In the summer, obviously, it's like 35 degrees. It's 5 o'clock out, and it's like 30 degrees. Where they have these minis, which are the best thing ever, and it's like these 200 ml beers. So and it's just awesome because it's so hot outside, so you're drinking, and so you don't want your beer to warm up, and so you go to the bar, the cafe, or you get a cup of coffee. Coffee's brilliant here, and you get these little Superbock mini, and it's just somehow they don't get you as drunks. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, crush a whole ton of those.
Yeah, they're great.
A lot of little bottles add up to one big bottle. Yeah, that's right. I got a cool beer story for you. So I was hanging up. I was at the gym the other day, and one of the guys I chatted with, and he said, "Hey Keith, I saw you at Elizabeth's retirement party a couple of weeks ago."
You're going to a lot of those these days, eh?
Yeah, no. He said, "Hey, I didn't know you knew her," and I said, I have no idea who you're talking about or which retirement party. Like, I wasn't anyone. He said, "Yeah, it was down at the Garrison Brewery down in the seaport." And so then Boomer starts thinking quickly, okay, where have I been? And then I realized one night I was out with my friend, and we're on the way back home, and he said, "Hey, let's pop into that brewery for a quick pint before we go home." I said, "Great idea." We go there, and the place is closed for a private event, but it's packed, like this. And I said, let's just go in, no one, just get a beer. No one's gonna know.
You're crashing retirement parties.
Yeah, it was Elizabeth's retirement party, and of course, this guy John, he waves to me. I knew another person, and my friend, he knew three people, and one turned into a few more bigger bottles, though, Rich. They weren't little small bottles.
Yeah. Well,
so anyway, happy retirement to Elizabeth. She had
Elizabeth. There you go. Congrats. Keith's crashing retirement parties now. The Wedding Crashers, by the way, 20 years old.
Oh man, that makes me feel really old.
Yeah.
I just found out. Well, I didn't find out, but you know, the Eminem album, one of my favorite. I absolutely love rap music, and the Eminem album is 25 years old, and I was like, oh my god. Anyways,
Okay, what we
First
got
time
going today,
here.
Steve? Anything big today?
Yeah,
anything
no,
special?
we've got a very special interview here with leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, who I'm sure a lot of our listeners are obviously familiar with. We certainly tried to have this interview 4 or 5 months ago, but things were busy on the campaign trail, and so we finally managed to round him up for an interview. And so, yeah, we have a very special interview with Pierre today. We'll kind of jump over to that, and then we'll chat about sort of markets and what's going on around the world. But without further ado, let's bring in.
Oh, but wait though. We did the interview 2 days ago, so we have to do Okay, here we go. Ready, Rich?
Yeah.
Pierre Poilievre, welcome to the Loonie Hour.
Great to be with you.
First appearance on the Loonie Hour. You were on my Saretsky show YouTube channel there maybe 3-4 years ago, I think, in the early days. We chatted about housing and Bitcoin and all that good stuff. But first time on the Loonie Hour. Pleasure to have you on. How are you doing these days? I mean, obviously, post election, you've got an important by-election coming up. But any sort of reflection that you can share with the audience here in terms of, you've had some time to sort of digest?
Well, listen, we're in the comeback phase. We almost won. We were a couple percentage points off winning. We had a massive share of vote, a big increase in vote and seats, but that's not enough. We got to win. We got to get over the finish line. And so we've got a government that's obviously in a honeymoon phase, but I think the way forward is to force a collision between the ridiculous expectations that Mark Carney has set and the very disappointing reality that it will encounter. Like, look, he's promising that he's going to somehow balance a fictitious operating budget in 3 years. He can't even tell us what that is. When he says operating, he says he's going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars more per year. And somehow this is going to cost Canadians less. He says he's going to build major projects, but won't utter the word pipeline, and nor will he get rid of the laws and taxes and regulations that prevent anything from getting built. Meanwhile, the problems that I've been identifying for years are either staying the same or getting worse. Inflation, crime, the housing crisis has mutated into something different, but still very damaging. And it's our job to prosecute him for all of these failures, and then also to present ourselves as a government in waiting. And I think that's the challenge we have as we get through the summer and into the fall and on to the next election.
Is there anything that you look back in terms of like your campaign messaging of, one of the things like Rich and we chatted about on the podcast was, the whole sort of elbows up theme, which is to say that, Trump is painted so much as the bad guy in Canada. Obviously, everybody, hates him and he's public enemy number one. But the idea that Canada was actually going to be able to sort of decouple and have any leverage in a trade war negotiation, we certainly didn't agree with. I think we're starting to see now as Carney's gotten in, there's been a lot of changes or almost what would you call elbows down, which is to say, hey, we'll give you this, we'll take that off. Is there anything that you would have changed in the messaging or any sort of takeaway there?
Well, I think what we're finding out is that the reason Trump wanted Carney as Prime Minister of Canada is because Carney's weak. He's been a weak prime minister. He's been weak in the negotiations. He's been forced already to climb down on things he said he was going to do. He's reversing himself. Now, he's not only taken off the digital services tax, which of course was a terrible tax, but it looked weak the way he put it on and then took it right off. He's shown weakness on, proactively accepting that there will be continued American tariffs on Canadian industry. These are like proactive unilateral concessions that he has not matched with any other counter concessions. So I think Trump is right now getting what he wants from this elbows down prime minister. Now, I hope that will reverse. I hope that Carney can get a deal. We want a success. We want this trade dispute to come to an end so we can get back to the most successful trading relationship the world has ever seen. But so far, what we've seen from Mark Carney is total weakness.
So can I ask you to jump in there quickly? So I made the argument, and maybe wrong, but from the start, that it's not about it. It wasn't necessarily about the deficit. It was really about sort of China's influence in Canada. The drugs, I think, people lie about that. It's obviously a big thing. The fact that Canada is a sieve for money laundering, crime, all this stuff, and really. So did you buy into that? Do you think that like what's your view? What does he want ultimately?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, because he has listed a ton of different grievances, and it's hard to know which one's the real one. My view on security and confronting Beijing is that we should do it for our own good, not for any other foreign country. Like, we've lost 50,000 people to fentanyl overdoses. That's more than died fighting for Canada in the Second World War. We've lost, we have tens of thousands of Canadians who are continually addicted to these opioids. We should secure the border, lock up the fentanyl dealers and the criminals to benefit and protect our people. We have a massive increase in gun crime, but well over 100% over the last decade. Most of the guns that are used in those crimes are coming illegally over the border. So again, for our own sake, we should secure our borders. And I don't think we have to view that as that is a concession to President Trump. Like, I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it so that there's not another mother who has to get a knock on the door from a police officer to say that her son has died of a fentanyl overdose or an illegal shooting. That is what we need to do it for. And frankly, over the last 10 years, the Liberals have opened our borders to all manner of illegal activity: guns, drugs, crime, migration, all of it. And we need to slam the door shut on all of those illegal activities for our own Canadian benefit, not to please any foreign leader, including Trump.
How do you kind of move forward from here? Like, I think like a lot of Canadians went out, they voted, whether they voted for you or they voted for Carney. I think there's a lot of Canadians, the overwhelming sort of conversation that I have, or the sentiment that seems to be out there, is, hey, listen, he just got in. We need to give him a grace period. We need to give him 6 months, 12 months, 18 months to go out and give him some runway. How do you sort of operate under that as the leader of the opposition? Do you continue to sort of attack? Do you just sort of wait and see how things play out? I'm just kind of curious from like a strategic perspective of how you handle this moving forward. I'm going to be honest with you. I think Trudeau is such an easy target. I think it was 8 or 9 years. People were so exhausted by him. Even his own party was exhausted by him. That it was such an easy target, and people said, "Okay, we've had enough." And clearly, I think the polls had shown that. But how do you sort of handle it today, moving forward?
Well, I think we should give grace where it's due. We've said that we would try to help him get a deal with the Americans, that where he puts forward legislation that will be more good than bad, that we'll help it pass. And then we hold him accountable for the results that he gets. Our job is the official opposition, so we have to continue to prosecute him. The idea that we should never criticize him, or that we should be there to glorify the prime minister's power, is not how our system works. We have an 800-year parliamentary tradition where the explicit mandate of the opposition is to prosecute the government. And so we are going to do that. And there will be those whose sensibilities are offended by that. But if they are, then they don't know how our system works. We have two sides in the House of Commons. That is by design. It is a place where the most powerful people in the land are supposed to tremble when they walk through the door. And so we have to do that job. And if we don't, then we would be doing a disservice to the Canadian people.
Yeah, I mean, I find it quite interesting. Obviously, you didn't get the outcome that you wanted, but I think ultimately what we've seen, at least from early day observation, is that the Liberal Party has actually ended up adopting many of the policies that you had pushed for, or at least proposed. It seems like the government has gone from sort of this further left-leaning party to almost more in the center. And I think it is interesting, right? We've seen they dropped the capital gains increase, which you lobbied hard against. We've seen the digital services tax come off. We've seen the immigration stuff
has been wound
Carbon
back.
tax.
Carbon tax has come off. So I find it very interesting that, I would say, some people would pat Mark Carney on the back. I would give you the kudos that I think you pushed that party in that direction.
Well, Carney was like the father of the carbon tax. He if you read all of his writing, he not only was he strongly in favor of what Trudeau did on the carbon tax, which he said very explicitly, but he said the carbon tax needed to go up even faster than Trudeau was proposing. So there's no doubt that we forced the elimination of the consumer carbon tax. But now we have to look out and keep our eyes peeled. So, for example, you've got something called the so-called clean fuel standard, which is another carbon tax on consumers. This is not just the industrial carbon tax, which Carney has
Can you tell us what that is, just for the listeners?
So basically, it's a wholesale charge on gasoline based on the carbon content in the mix. So gasoline, depending on it, the blend has varying amounts of carbon in it, and this tax will apply based on the carbon content of that gas. So then the money is supposedly going to subsidize green alternatives. So even it's kind of in a lot of ways worse than the other carbon tax, because that one, at least there was a rebate. You got some of the money back in the mail or in your bank account. This one, there is no rebate back to the consumer. There's a bunch of subsidies to favored energy suppliers. And when it's fully implemented, it will be 17 cents a liter, which is where the carbon tax left off last year before it was eliminated. So it is a very bad tax, and we're going to have to fight against that. And there's other ways that he's getting at the tax, like the ban on gas-powered and diesel-powered vehicles, which is in a lot of ways going to be even more expensive than the carbon tax, because it will add about $20,000 to the life cycle cost of a vehicle. If you divide that over 6 or 7 years, call it 10 years. You say a vehicle has 10-year life cycle, that's $2,000 a year. And so it's going to be very expensive. So he's got all these anti-energy policies that he continues to say that he can keep in place while getting things done. All of those things have to go. And now the battle is going to be that he has this caucus of hardcore net zero anti-fossil fuel fanatics who are going to fight to keep it in place. And that's why I tell Canadians, if you really want to reverse this extremely costly anti-working class net zero agenda, you're going to need to have a conservative government to do it, because we're the only ones who both say it and believe it. And I should add that we'll do it.
Rich, I'm sure you're dying to chime in there.
Yeah,
Well,
I know.
I know it's Keith's turn, but the EV, the internal combustion engine ban, is insane. That's Carry on, Keith.
Well,
And it kicks
it's
in
really
next
interesting.
year. It's next year. Like the full ban is by 2035, but
it's
the
bullshit.
graduation
Well,
starts next year.
Pierre, it's bullshit.
Vic,
It's never going to happen.
Just to put it on record, though, Rich, why don't you share with everyone in the Loonie Hour community again, what is the contribution of Canada to carbon production relative to other bigger countries?
It's 1.5%. I mean, China produces more carbon emissions than all of the Western world combined. They continue 60% of all of their emissions are coal. They're building 314 new coal-fired power plants right now. The idea that they're transitioning or leading the change to renewables is bogus. And the entire West has basically allowed China, under the guise of climate change, to hollow out our industrial base. And what's craziest about it is virtually all of the so-called green energy legislation is an attacks the working class and favors like subsidizing EVs for my friend Chester, who makes $500,000 a year. It's nuts. Anyways,
Subsidizes the investments of Mark Carney. I mean, he has all these financial interests in. He bragged about how he managed to get the airport in London to require this new green fuel on airplanes, and then that he had investments in the supplier of this fuel. His company is invested in heat pumps and in other of these green initiatives, and then he pushes them. He pushed Westinghouse, the nuclear company, in the leaders' debate. Well, Westinghouse is owned by Brookfield. the company in which Carney continues to have a vested interest. So it's people like him that make vast sums of money off of all of these so-called green policies. And you're right, it's the working poor that get crushed once again. So we're going to reverse all of that. We're going to unleash a torrent of energy production in this country. Low-cost energy is the key to prosperity. And we have a tremendous supply of that energy. We just need to unleash its production here.
Speaking of energy, Pierre, I think the Loonie Hour community would love to know, how many pull-ups can you do?
Pull-ups? Depending how strict. I think I probably do about, really strict?
Drum
I
roll.
would say probably close to 10. I'm guessing. I haven't tried in a while, but I think I could probably do 10.
I don't believe that. You look like you're in good shape.
That's a lot. That
10
10
depends.
yeah.
It depends how you do those. If you cheat, if you're swinging your hips and you're using momentum, you can do a lot more. But if you're doing it if you're doing it the hard way, all the way down, all the way up to the chest, it's a lot tougher. So I'll have to go back and challenge that.
Maybe the next election cycle, we get all the leaders to line up on stage and do, like the old Seinfeld episode, the feats of strength, something like that.
Keith is 80 years old and he can do 17, by the way.
Yeah,
you can do 17?
Yeah.
You can do 17?
I was a witness.
I'm getting up there now. It's pretty good.
Is this 17 strict though? Super strict?
Rich, let him have it.
He did it. I know he's my boss and I have to kiss his ass. And I voted for you and I'm not going to kiss your ass either. But yeah, he actually did it. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it.
That's impressive.
Okay, let's move along. Let's
back full circle. I have a question while we're
I'm not finished. That's not my only question. We had
you lost your chance. That was your one big moment, man. Sorry.
Well, Rich was getting ready to go there. But truthfully, if I was running in the last election as the leader of any of the parties, I wouldn't have wanted to win. And the reason I say that, I think the entire world, the Western world, so including the Americans, all the European countries, Japan, and China as well, everyone's economy, Pierre, has become synchronized at the same time. And governments everywhere are having a real difficult time trying to get their spending under control. And it's coming at the exact same time when the whole world, we've experienced a 40-year cycle with interest rates going lower and lower. And then they hit zero in 08, 09. And then the yield curve was flattened. So we had no price discovery in the bond market, the biggest market in the world for over a decade. And now we're coming out of that. So rates are going higher. But more importantly, then with Canada, the amount of tax revenues that's being allocated to interest expense is increasing now at an exponential rate. So I know during the election, one of the big topics, of course, hey, what's the budget going to look like for you guys and so forth. And I still don't think we've had the final numbers come out for a budget for last year, which I think it's embarrassing for us as a country, especially if you want to attract foreign capital. But we're going to see budgets, they're just simply going to blow out around the world. So the Americans just had their big, beautiful budget. I think that's what they called it, I think, wasn't it, Steve? The big
beautiful
budget.
bill.
The big, beautiful bill, yeah.
And ours is going to be the big, beautiful deficit.
It's going to be enormous. So the reason I say I wouldn't want to be in power
the big,
right
beautiful
now,
bankruptcy.
It's going to be, though, that the probability of a major country hitting some kind of a credit or liquidity crisis is quite high, because I almost happened with the Brits again a few weeks ago. And I think, you mentioned, the honeymoon is probably over right now for the prime minister. And as we get rid of all the economic noise over the first 6 months because of the tariffs and no tariffs and so forth, we're going to start to see some potential serious moments coming up. And it's going to be an experience that I don't think a lot of countries are going to be prepared to handle. So for me, I would prefer to be on this side and let these guys try to handle it, because I think it's going to be very difficult. It's not really a question. It's just to give you a perspective of what a lot of the investment managers with a global view are seeing right now. It's not just a Canadian-centric view. It's happening everywhere at the same time. And it's pretty easy to see, really.
That's true. It's still a choice. The Swiss didn't do it. Look what the Swiss did through COVID. They kept tight budgets. They did not print money. They did not have mass QE. I think they even had balanced budgets in the last 5 years. What did they get? Very low inflation, extremely low inflation, and the lowest unemployment in all of Europe. And to say, well, we can't be like the Swiss because we're so internationally dependent. They're more internationally dependent than we are. They're literally landlocked by the rest of Europe, and or at least they're surrounded by all European countries who all have the euro, and they have their own Swiss franc, which they've protected, and they've bought gold. They loaded up gold in the Swiss National Bank loaded up gold in their vault, and as a result, they have the best currency in the world, consistently the lowest inflation in the Western world. They have very low unemployment, very high incomes. So I agree with you that this phenomenon of overspending, money printing, monetary manipulation is common, but I don't want that to be seen as an excuse. And it's too often, it's like when our mom said, just because your friends are jumping off a bridge doesn't mean you have to jump off a bridge, right? Like, yes, there are all these deficits and there's all this money printing in other countries, but that doesn't mean we had to do it or that we should continue to do it.
Are you,
In
are you
fact,
sensing
it's
any
quite the contrary.
Are you sensing any urgency with this conversation when you're in Ottawa and within different groups?
Not in Ottawa. No, in Ottawa, it's the opposite. I mean, the bureaucracy, the consultants, just those who feed off the state want to keep the party going. They've done very well, and it's been great for the bureaucratic managerial class to have a massive expansion in the state. But for everyone else, yeah, they see it like the inflation is big, and it's probably a lot bigger than than Stats can't even report. So everywhere I go, people say they can't figure out why it is that their prices. I was speaking to my buddies, 2 daughters. They're students at the same time as they work multiple jobs, and they say everything costs so much money. They don't know how they're ever going to move out of their homes, even in their parents' homes, into their own homes. They can't get ahead. Just driving back and forth to work burns up a good part of their paycheck. Everywhere I go, people say they can't believe how their money is being vaporized. And so it's continuing monetary inflation that is really unacceptable. If you think about it, over the last 50 years, the cost of everything has gone down, and yet the price of everything has gone up, way up. How is it that we produce 4 times as much corn on the same acre with 80% less manpower, water, and fertilizer, and yet the price of corn is way up? How is it that the cost of canned goods has gone up, even though we use 85% less metal in those goods? How is it that it costs 20 times more for an ebook today than it cost for a hard copy book that had to be printed with ink and binding and shipping and storage 50, 60 years ago? The answer is that while the cost of providing us these goods has gone way down, the governments continue to inflate everything. It's the purchasing power of our money that is in constant decline. And that, I think, is the biggest problem right now. It's the reason the working class is so frustrated. They're doing all the work, they're doing everything right, and they're getting thoroughly screwed by monetary inflation.
Ever been abroad and needed Wi-Fi? Download Saily. Tired of telecom oligopolies ripping you off? Download Saily. Want to avoid sketchy SIM sellers at the airport? Download Saily. Saily might be the only travel app you need. It provides an internet connection wherever you travel and saves you money on roaming fees. It's easy to use, affordable, and reliable all over the world. Saily is the modern, seamless way to get connected without the need for physical SIM cards. With eSIM technology, you can instantly activate service from anywhere in the world. No more waiting in line for a local SIM or dealing with expensive roaming charges. Saily offers flexible plans to fit your needs, whether you're traveling for work or leisure. Plus, you can switch between networks in just a few taps, ensuring you always get the best coverage at the best rates. Whether you're a frequent traveler, an expat, or just someone who wants more flexibility with their phone, Saily's got you covered. No hidden fees, no contracts, just affordable, reliable data wherever you go. Visit Saily.com/Loonie Hour for 15% off.
Pierre, we've got a mutual friend, Jeff Booth, who
Yes.
wrote a good book on the
Price of tomorrow.
price of tomorrow, essentially currency debasement. He's a big Bitcoin proponent, but whether you're Bitcoin or gold, one of the examples I like to use is you look at like housing, and which I'm actively involved. I know you and I have chatted quite a bit on housing over the years. Is if you look at the price of real estate in Canada, particularly like where I am here in Vancouver, if you denominate the average home sale price and you denominate that in ounces of gold, it actually peaked in 2007.
Right.
So home prices have actually been falling in ounces of gold. So I always look at that and say, I think it's just a different frame of reference to look through and to say, what is really happening here? Are house prices really going up, or is this just a monetary debasement where today, two working people can't afford a home? And basically, what I see today is as a young person, unless you have help from mom and dad, there's just no chance of saving up for that down payment. Actually, the hardest thing I'm seeing is it's the down payment towards the house. It's not so much the mortgage payment. The mortgage payment is obviously high and it's burdensome, but it's actually saving the money after you're paying all your taxes. And meanwhile, you're probably renting somewhere. So your rents are really high. You're paying all your taxes and then trying to save, $100,000 or $200,000 for a down payment. It's going to take you years and years and years to get on the housing ladder, as obviously these prices move higher and higher due to the monetary debasement. So I find it very, very peculiar. I mean, we can kind of get into housing because I think there's a lot of issues going on there, but.
No, you're right, and the fact that you take, as you said, in terms of gold, the price of housing has not gone up. It is, if gold were your money, then housing would be pretty much consistent over the last, I'm guessing, 30, 40, 50 years. But because we're not buying things with gold, we're buying things with fiat money that is continually debasing and devaluing. The appearance is that the cost of things is rising. And for the effect of that is that our people who start with nothing, youth, newcomers, working class people, those from disadvantaged backgrounds, they feel like they have no hope because, the opportunity is here, they're here, and every time as they work to try and climb the ladder, it goes further and further away. And that's what I saw. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got so much support during the campaign, particularly in places that had never voted conservative, places like Windsor and Hamilton and working class region parts of London and Winnipeg, Timmins, people where folks have typically voted NDP. In the past, they voted conservative this time because they saw we were the party of the battlers, the workers, the people who are getting out of bed every morning and fighting for a better future, but getting totally shafted by the system. And we need to fix that. And it's going to mean that we end the monetary debasement and the inflationary deficits that have screwed over the working class.
Yeah, so we should chat about those deficits because one of the themes we've had on the podcast here has been, obviously, as Keith mentioned, these deficits that are blowing out in all these Western democracies. And it's estimated, I believe the Carney government, again, they haven't put out a budget, but it's estimated right now that it should be roughly about a $92 billion deficit. I mean, we'll see. I mean, Keith will probably tell you it's going to be higher, but
his finance minister should write a letter and resign, is what I would suggest that would be, but anyway.
I think they will do everything in the power to keep it less than 100 as the number coming.
Yeah, they don't like triple digits, eh?
So Pierre, what was the record? What was the record high under Trudeau? I can't remember. It was it was during the pandemic.
It was about 200 and something, but that was the COVID. Like that was when the
economy was shut down
and all that. But if you take out COVID, I think Trudeau's record was last year, which was 60 billion. And remember, when he landed a $60 billion deficit, that was like the country flipped out because it was supposed to be 40. And then remember, Chrystia Freeland came in and she resigned the day she was going to introduce the fall update. But going from 40 to 60 was seen as a massive blowout. Well, this year it was supposed to be a $40 billion deficit. Now it could be 60, 70, 80, 90. We don't know. But the reality is that Carney is worse than Trudeau. And I know that's hard to believe because the image we have of the guy is, he's a tight-fisted banker and he doesn't wear colorful socks. He's much more temperamentally and visually conservative in his image. But The reality is he's costing more than Trudeau, and he has made vastly bigger spending promises than Trudeau has made. So I think we've got to stop giving him a free ride on his spending because of his image. He can't. He's proven that he cannot control the budget, or he doesn't want to.
So my question is a bit different, which is about productivity. So I talk a lot about productivity, a lot about capex, a lot about investment, net direct investment flows or outflows, I should say. And fundamentally, one of the main issues, which is related to the deficit and inflation, is the lack of productivity growth. The Bank of Canada went on to say, Carolyn Rogers, friend of the show, has gone on to say it was literally an emergency. We've had no productivity growth in 10 years. Our GDP per capita has been flat. Between 1994 and 2015, our GDP per capita rose lockstep with the US. Issues, one of the real reasons we have our GDP per capita falling and weak productivity growth is, yes, immigration, but also a lack of capex, capital investment, declining in many, many instances, but flat outside of real estate. Sorry, Steve, which is not a productive asset. You've talked a lot about bringing investment home, and I think it's really easy to say. We know Mark Carney says it all the time, but what are some actual concrete steps that you would take to reverse the outflow, which is primarily, by the way, of Canadian investors leaving?
Okay, so let's just define the problem really quickly. Productivity is a very simple concept. It's the GDP we generate for every hour we work. So it's calculated by taking the entire GDP of the country and divided by the total number of hours that all Canadians work. And if you do that, you get $53 in USD. In America, they generate $83, so more than 50% above us. So per hour worked, just to put that into perspective, the American worker could work a third less hours than the Canadian worker and make exactly the same amount of money. Just to they could basically have a 3.5-day work week to our 5-day work week, and they would be making as much money as we make. That's what it means. Or if they work the same 5 days, they make 50-60% more. So why is this? You said capex, capital investment, and again, you're right. If you take total investment in Canada, divide it by the number of workers we have, it's $15,000 of capex per worker. In the States, it's $28,000 per worker, both measured in American money. So apples to apples, the American worker receives about twice the investment, the tools, the technology, the means of production. So they're getting better CNC machines and 3D printers and software, IT, a milling machine that can carve a piece of steel into a tool. They get a better one, a newer one, a faster one, a bigger one than the Canadian millwright gets. So that's the core problem. So what's the solution? Because your question was, okay, great, we all agree. What the hell's the solution? Well, we should make this the best place to get an after-tax risk-adjusted return on investment, because capital goes where capital grows. So my idea is, 1, zero capital gains tax when you reinvest your sale proceeds in Canada. So this would be a way, if you, for example, sold the family farm for $5 million, today you have no incentive to put that $5 million or the after-tax share of it to work in Canada. You could very easily invest it in the States or in some other place, and you would get no tax. There'd be no loss. In fact, it'd be superior returns because those places have better tax regimes to invest in. So zero tax would mean that farm family could take the $5 million, redeploy it in a local family business, in a local factory, possibly even in the Canadian markets. And that would allow us to, and it would also allow us to roll capital over again and again and again and again. Imagine if you could invest in home building with a capital gains tax-free option, you'd get more investment in construction. So that is one way we could do it. And it would create an incredible home bias, by the way. It would mean people would say, if I invest abroad, I have to pay cap gains. If I bring it home, I pay nothing. Secondly, we have to cut marginal income tax rates on Canadian workers, because right now there is no incentive for a high earning person to, or any, and it doesn't matter what you earn, there's no incentive to actually go and work an extra hour, because, or earn a bonus, because you're going to get dinged with high taxes. The third thing is we need the fastest permitting in the world. Right now, we have the second slowest permits of any country in the nearly 40-member OECD nation list. So if you want to build a mine, a pipeline, a business center, a factory, a warehouse, you have to wait longer than every country other than Slovenia. And so why the hell would you build it here? Why wouldn't you throw your money to another place where you can turn the project around in a few months? So we need to, I think we should make a commitment that all three levels of government are going to get together and have the fastest building permits in the developed world. It should be lightning quick to get a permit. And then finally, we need to get more competition, open up more competition in banking and telcos and all these other areas that are now protected against competitors. They need to face more competition, so that they have to fight for the customers and deliver more for less. So those are my solutions to get us producing more.
So one of the big things that I find crazy is that oil is just such a fundamental core of our economy. Without it, we would be totally effed. And it's, it's just its contribution on the current account balance, which is where it matters, not the GDP or employment, frankly. Not that many people work in the industry. It is just a constant flow of US dollars, hard currency, into our coffers, not to mention royalties, taxes, and stuff like that. What, to put your head, or if you can, put yourself in the mind of your opposition, why are they so insistent on ignoring a fundamental basic reality of the Canadian economy? And I know you, but I don't know, can you shed some light on that?
Well, they've signed on to a radical net zero agenda that has been, as I said earlier, very profitable for a small group of globalists and elites who've managed to extract all kinds of subsidies and grants and tax abatements and anti-competitive regulations in their favor. And Mark Carney is among them. He's profited off of this agenda. And they've been very successful in pursuing it. And now, politically, he has a hard time reversing himself and doing the opposite of what he spent the last 10 years saying. But
they have economists. Sorry to interrupt you, but they have economists on their team. They know what a current account balance is. They know what net exports are. I mean, do they not see the same data you see and I see? And
either they have a almost like psychedelic view that they can create a centrally planned economy where the government decides that other industries are going to grow faster because the government says so, and they're going to subsidize and push buttons and turn knobs and pull strings and try and create new industries that are not economical. That's their view. Or they don't care. What they really care about is the politics of their agenda, and they're ignoring the economics. It's one of those two things. But we have. You talked about productivity. I think Jack Mintz, the economist, has done some work on how an hour worked in the energy sector produces more GDP than any other sector by far. Like it's like orders of magnitude, something like $500 an hour of GDP for work in the energy sector. I suspect that it's like a negative for federal bureaucrats.
It actually is, by the way. There's a productivity index for public sector and non-business sector. And actually, at the time when there's a 22-year high in public sector employment as a share of total, there's a 10-year low in public sector productivity growth. Sorry, public sector productivity.
I believe it. And so look, the answer there is more energy, less government. And that's what we need to do. And it's pretty straightforward how we achieve it. You got to repeal the anti-resource laws, C-69, the anti-pipeline law, the tanker ban, the industrial carbon tax, the energy cap. All that stuff's got to go, and just unleash the trillions of dollars of wealth that can enrich us all.
I think, though, Until there is an economic crisis in Canada, it's not going to happen, because it's my expectation that the belief is, we keep trudging along 1 week, 1 month after another, and this talk about productivity and current account surpluses.
Yawn.
People don't, yeah, they don't get it. Again, the good news is, earlier I talked about monetary debasement, Pierre. The result, the end game of monetary debasement is going to be a crisis in our bond market, the European bond market, and everyone else's. Maybe it might be perfect timing then for
When do you think that happens? Do you have a timing?
no, that the point is now, because again, the amount of tax revenue is allocated to a zero productive asset, which is interest expense on our debt. That's increasing at an exponential rate. It's just a matter of when, not if, that breaks. And the moment it doesn't have to break in Canada first. So this is an example where you don't want Canada to be number one in the G7, right? You want us to be last. But if it breaks somewhere else first, I assure you, the whole world runs on the same global yield curve, and it's going to hit Canada dramatically. And then maybe that's when we get the chance to make a lot of these great changes that are so easy for Canada to do. But until they have the incentive to do it, I think it's gonna be a bit of a struggle here.
Unless you can get GDP up through mass immigration.
Yeah, that's a terrible thing for working class people. Pierre, do us a favor. Can you tell everybody in the House of Commons to stop comparing Canada to the G7, please?
Well, on the debt level, the interesting thing is they love to say that we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. What that they're not telling you is that they're using the CPP.
Yes, we've talked about this.
Our net debt.
Yeah, net debt's bogus. They use the CPP and the Quebec one too.
The Quebec Pension Plan, the Heritage Fund in Alberta. So it's not really true that we have the lowest debt. In fact, our debt to GDP is now over 100%, just government debt. The other thing that they're not telling you is that our big problem is private debt. We have much higher levels of household debt and corporate debt than our competitors. And so when you stack household, corporate, government together, we are among the worst and getting worse all the time. So, we need to stop making excuses and get this. We know what we need to do. We know what we need to do. We just need to unleash the free enterprise system, use our resources, bring back competition, reward work, initiative, and we can do all those things. That's actually the good news.
Pierre, I know we want to be respectful of your time here, but one of the things I find interesting is on the immigration side. And I know you've come out recently, but I just from my vantage point is just seeing, we've talked about obviously the monetary debasement that's impacted, asset prices such as housing. But I think another thing we've seen over the last number of years was immigration side, right? Having population growth running by 1.2 million people per year through these temporary foreign worker programs, through these foreign student programs. And obviously what I've seen is basically you've seen massive growth in rent prices, you've seen massive growth in home prices, but actually what's most interesting about it is the response from the development community has been like everybody just started actually extrapolating this massive rent growth. And so now I think what we're actually seeing now is sort of the hangover, which is okay, they finally tightened immigration, population growth is now running at effectively zero. And you actually have a ton of supply that is coming to market as that population growth slows to zero. I would still argue that, maybe you're in a structural imbalance long term, but I know every government keeps coming out and saying 500,000 new homes, 500,000 new homes a year. We're going to build them. But everything that I'm seeing today is housing starts are falling off a cliff because really the math has changed dramatically. Interest rates went up. Government was forced to tighten immigration. And now you're left with a market that is seeing declining rents, which impacts developer pro formas, falling home prices, and in my view, a construction industry that's actually going to get hollowed out over the next probably 24 months.
And we still have a lot of those people here, the international students, too many temporary foreign workers. Our youth can't get jobs. I was speaking to a small business owner earlier today, and like the number of resumes coming in every time he posts anything is just insane. Like it's just through the roof, and it's all the jobs he's advertising for are for young people. He's a fitness trainer, and his he puts out a little notice of a job, and it's hundreds of resumes come in, which means there's just tons of young people out there who can't find work because their market has been flooded with international students on work permits and temporary foreign workers who take the jobs. And so our youth, their problem, a year ago is they couldn't afford a home. Now they have a new problem is they can't get a job. And even if they do get a job, their wages are suppressed. So we have an entire generation now who are unable to earn a living as a result of these federal policies. And I know the government claims they're reversing course. We'll see what they actually do. But look, they say they want to get our temporary population down to 5% of our overall population. Look, it was 2% under Harper. That was 10 years ago. So 5% would still be 2.5 times higher than it was a decade ago. It's still way too high. So we need more people leaving than coming over the next several years, so that our housing, healthcare, and job market can actually catch up, and we can put our own Canadian people first.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Keith, you have any final questions?
No, I'm good. Actually, I'm quite impressed with the 10 pull-up number, Pierre. So I wasn't expecting that today. That's a good number. That's a good number.
I've got a couple of questions, but
go ahead, Rich.
Well, it's sort of more of like, I guess I'm an economist, I suppose. I moonlight as one anyway. My heroes are Thomas Sowell, Milton Friedman, John Maynard Keynes. I was just wondering, from a political standpoint, who are some of your heroes that were people that you've read and tried to emulate your career or your philosophical political thinking around? Or
well, I think the best overall politician of all time in the English-speaking world would be Abraham Lincoln. He's almost angelic in the life that he lived. But I also like a lot of other things about him. He was self-taught. He came from an extremely poor family, and he learned his stepmother taught him how to read a little bit, and then he would sit next to the fire at night after his family went to bed in their little log cabin, and he would read. And he pounded in fence posts. He worked as a postmaster. He was a lawyer. He was a land surveyor. He fought his way in as an outsider. He was the first leader of his party. He was an unexpected winner, and then he stared down both slavery and secession and won against both. He was both pragmatic, but also principled. He knew what he wanted to achieve, but he knew that he also had to make certain strategic detours in order to get there. But that allowed him to eventually sign the Emancipation Proclamation. And that was in itself a big risk, because he knew it would prolong the very unpopular Civil War, because it would make the South want to fight even harder. But he did it anyway, and he won. And then, just as he was about to enjoy the fruits of his victory, he ultimately died. And then the final thing I would say about him is that he was an incredible writer. I love his prose. They're simple, they're structured, they're clear. There's no garbage word. There's no superfluous extra waste words. It's just good, clean, sharp, structured English. So I think that Abraham Lincoln is the greatest of all time.
Did Tiff Macklem ever buy you a beer when you got inflation right?
No, nobody thanked me for any of that.
He owes you one at least.
Yeah, I mean, my God, but they were all wrong.
Of course they were.
Like every single bloody one of them, all of them, the entire, especially Mark Carney. That's the thing that's so damn frustrating, is that he was one of those, and he's on record back in 2021, 2022 saying, inflation's not a problem, keep printing, keep spending. And we paid the price for it. And here he is acting as though he's some kind of economic oracle, when his track record on this and so many other issues was a disaster. I mean, you're in London right now, Keith? Do I have that right?
No, I'm in London.
You're in London, Richard.
Yeah.
He
Do you know what
screwed
they
up the
call him
housing
here,
market.
Pierre? Do you know what they call him?
What's that?
They called him the unreliable boyfriend.
Yes, I knew that. That was in the Telegraph.
I knew that literally 10 years ago. I lived in London from 2011 to 2014 to 2024, or 23 rather. And yeah, I watched him stick his nose into Brexit, which was an outrage because he's a technocrat. In the UK, they take that civil service stuff really, really seriously. And whether you voted Brexit or Remain, people were outraged that he stuck his nose in there, and they literally used to call him an unreliable boyfriend.
So, Rich, what is an unreliable boyfriend?
It's
just for the Loonie Hour community.
Yeah, so it was because he was setting interest rate policy, and he ultimately waffled. And again, this is just the facts. Like he is to blame for the massive bubble in London real estate property. He kept interest rates below he kept interest rates below inflation and real interest rates negative for ages at a time when it was completely unnecessary. He blamed supply, but the Bank of England is full of really sharp PhD economists, students, and they came out and said, no, that's bogus. It was the financial, basically silliness that caused it. And so, yeah, he does not have a good reputation here. That's just a fact. But
no, nor should he.
No, it's just.
But all of that was glossed over by the Canadian media. And
they were carrying water for the guy. I mean, it's tough to run an election when you're fighting the CBC, and maybe that was a mistake on your part. You should have waited until you won and then defunded the CBC.
Look,
it's a fair point, maybe. Yeah.
The bottom line is that these guys, the CBC's never been fair to the Conservatives. So even with the other part, with the other leaders took a more nuanced approach, and it didn't win them any prize for the CBC. So, but listen, we keep fighting on, and I believe in the end we're going to triumph. We've got the right answers to the problems people are going to face, and so I'm optimistic and winsome, and we're going to do well.
Pierre, as we wrap up this interview, obviously want to thank you for your time. You've got an upcoming by-election here. Also, what's the deal here? There's like 140 names in the ballot. What's the deal there?
So basically there's this committee that goes around flooding ballots with names of people who are not actually running.
They flooded your riding and previous riding of Carleton, correct?
I was the only one they flooded in the last election, and now they're following me to a different by-election. And in fact, I understand many of the names of the people who were on the Carleton ballot are now on the Battle River Crowfoot ballot. So it is obviously a scam and a stunt, and it's designed to confuse and clutter the ballot and cause chaos in the system. And I announced today that I'm calling on the government to actually change the law to make it impossible for these interest groups to do this, because it's bonkers, and it gives these very long, confusing ballots that are hard for people who might have a disability or might have vision problems due to the fact that they're elderly, or and just causes general lack of confidence in the system. So basically, what I'm calling the government to do is require everybody who runs for office to have 200-300 names of signatories endorsing them, and that they have to be unique names. That would make it impossible for a big ballot like this to happen again. But anyway, it's a scam, and it's got to end, and that's what I called for the government to do in my letter to them today.
Pierre, though, I mean, the Prime Minister could end this with one tweet and one press conference. You just have to come out and say, hey, this is uncalled for, and let's get on with it.
How is it allowed in the first place, though? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Whether people want to vote for you or not, I mean, it's obviously bad for democracy to do that kind of shit.
That's why they're doing it.
Tiff Macklem's kid.
Yeah. I don't think Tiff is one of the candidates.
No, I'm just bugging you.
Poor Tiff.
Pierre, wishing you well in the upcoming by-election. Appreciate your time. And again, wishing you all the success. Thanks so much for coming on the Loonie Hour.
Thank you very much for having me. Great to be with you guys.
That was fun, guys. That was a nice conversation.
It was.
Yeah,
it was
no,
really
it
cool.
was good. Good to have him on, and hopefully some insightful conversation there for our listeners. This is, of course, an open invite to the Prime Minister as well. If he cares to join the Loonie Hour, we're happy to have him on. So no pressure.
I mean, I just my just thing, just on that. I mean, I just think it's cool. Like, it's what an opportunity the Loonie Hour has afforded us. I mean, we love doing the show every week. We love responding to the emails we get. By the way, keep them short if you want us to get back to you, with promptly. But it's just it was just it's wild. I never thought that was going to happen when we started this 3 years ago. So that was cool. It was cool to get some insight into what's going on in the mind of one of the more important legislators in Canada.
It's kind of interesting as well because we consistently talked about the energy sector. We talked about lately a lot of weight put on the budgets that are coming up around the world. The population story and housing and everything. So it's nice to hear that these are the main items that are on the top of his list as well.
Keith, I think
we're going in the right direction. We're going in the right direction.
I think what we should mention though, and maybe there wasn't enough pushback during the interview, but I think, Keith, you and I are probably of the same view here, which is to say that whether it was Carney getting in or Pierre getting in, we were going to run significant deficits regardless.
I think it's impossible because if you just say they decide to run a balanced budget, that's what they want to do. Get things back on track. The economy, what happens with the economy, Rich? Instantly goes, plop. It's going to stop. It's going to stop working. So they have to try to ease into it. So, but I was sincere when I suggested, I think, I would not want to be in power right now running these super deficits. Because I do suspect several or many of these countries or governments are going to run into a pretty significant event coming up. And they're going to say, hey, no one saw it coming. No one's ever warned us about it. Loonie Hour warns you about it every morning.
But wait a second. We're talking out of both sides of our mouth a little bit here, because we can't say that running huge deficits is bad, but if you run a surplus, that's also bad. You know what I mean? The point that the point I make when I say we should be much more fiscally prudent is that I would rather have short-term pain and then for some long-term gain, and there's no political appetite for any pain at any time ever, and that to me is a mistake because it'll eventually come down the road. I mean, that's I don't necessarily.
I think Keith and I are basically just arguing that the system is reaching its end point.
Yeah, I think Rich's point is not very sharp, Steve. It's pretty blunt.
He's had too many of those 200 ml beers.
What you call it? Super bloke? Super
buck. It's a good beer.
Buck? How do you spell buck?
Super buck. B-O-C-K.
That's not how you spell
Super
it.
buck.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's good beer. Those who know. But no, I'm serious, Keith. I think you don't have to run deficits. You can accept weak growth. I don't believe that for a second. But that's okay. We're allowed to disagree, right, Keith?
Yeah, of course. I mean, your belief system is a bit skewed on this one, but I agree with Steve's comment that you just said, Steve, in that, my view, and I think you agree with yours as well, we've just reached the end point of this long super cycle, and it doesn't matter what they're trying to do. I think the only quick, rip the Band-Aid approach, and it's something that I would do, I would literally cut. I mean, this is very dramatic, of course, but I would do as many dramatic things as possible to attract as much foreign capital as possible really, really quickly. You want to get it done for September 1, because if you suck the capital out of other countries, then they're the ones who are left will have to, fend for themselves when this potential problem happens. So how do you attract foreign investment? It's not this long process of improving productivity and that doesn't work. Make it incredibly easy to develop our only net export. That's all you do that, and you cut taxes to the bone for it. I mean, you just do those two simple things.
Do you think that bond market revolts, though? You cut taxes obviously too much, and then you have sort of what's happening in the UK.
But no, you have to cut spending along with it. That's the point. it's not just one side or the other. I mean, that's the issue I think the US is going to have, where they repeatedly always cut taxes and never rein in their spending. And they always say growth is going to do the heavy lifting on the revenue side. And they're always wrong because, you know, their expectations are way too rosy.
They just need a different Fed chair.
Yeah.
I'll cut rates 100 points. No, I'll go 125. I'll go 150. Yeah. Anyway, though, you know, we're going down that path. And, you know, we sort of joke when the sleepy days of summer, like Elizabeth retired, of course. So she's not doing much these days.
The biggest event of the summer, to be honest.
Yeah, I think the fall, though, things will, you know, it's kind of ironic. You know, I was chatting with someone yesterday, but the day after Labor Day, you know, all of a sudden, oh, wow, like in the span of 3 days, the world changed for some reason. And it's not. It's just that people are back on their desk and they start pressing the button and money moves around.
Is that what you do after Labor Day?
It's true. There is a lot.
It's literally true.
Yeah,
it's literally
I know.
true. Yeah,
all of Europe. I mean, all of Europe goes on vacation for like 4 weeks. I'm being generous. Probably more like 6 weeks. You know, it's amazing. The volumes just like literally on like the NASDAQ are a little bit less, and certainly in Europe. But anyways.
One of my good friends, he's an institutional trader in New York, and but for the whole, like for literally the latter part of July and all of August, they have a family beach house down in the Jersey Shore, and he's literally out of the city for 6 weeks, just on the beach. Something happens, he has his phone, but that's how slow things move in the big money world during the
Gym
summer.
tan laundry.
There you go. Keith doesn't know what's going on.
No, Keith
I
doesn't
don't know what that
reference.
means. I don't know what that.
All right, it's all right,
what-
Boomer. Don't worry about it.
You don't worry about it.
I'm not.
You know,
cool.
it's interesting, like to tie up that whole sort of conversation with Pierre, and we just talked about sort of the system reaching its endpoint. There's an interesting report that came out this week on from the Fraser Institute, highlighting that the average Canadian family spent 42.3% of its income on taxes. That's more than housing, food, and clothing combined. And they have some databases essentially that goes back from 1961 to 2024 and shows the growth of taxation in this country has grown far faster than even food and shelter and all that other stuff. But it's also grown faster than the CPI index. So I mean, it's kind of like, you know, Keith, you're like, well, we should just cut taxes. I mean, I think that these guys are so desperate for tax revenues. I mean, obviously, government deficits continue to grow, more people in the public sector, which with Rich, you've highlighted as well, the declining productivity in that public sector as well. That it's kind of like the system is basically just like eating itself.
That's exactly. Yeah.
When I want to talk, you apparently have to hit the mute button, turn it off. But so I mean, what's very clear here, no matter how much taxes are charged and collected, it's never enough. They can go to 100%, and this still not going to be enough. So this is a virus for governments in the entire Western world. It's not just Ottawa or pick your province or the Americans or anyone else. You know, again, we've binged on lower and lower rates forever, and we've tried to leverage that output, and because of that, they're always chasing their tail. I mean, at some point, though, if you're taxed too much, like, why would you want to work harder?
Yeah.
There's a cost, right? There's a cost for doing that, and it's kind of interesting. I forget who the guy was. One of the big successful business guys based in California. I don't know his company. You would know the name of the company if I can remember it. Anyway, he just basically said, "Hey, I'm out of here. I'm moving to Nashville."
I mean, it's happened a lot. We know this has happened a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. You're going.
There's
you know,
loads
I mean,
and
like,
loads of
Tennessee and Texas, right?
In Canada, like, let's be honest, like, where are you going? I mean, maybe Alberta, maybe.
Well,
Like,
Alberta
at least
wouldn't be a maybe. Alberta would be number one on your.
Well, we know
destination
that,
from a
but I
tax
mean,
perspective.
But I think Steve's
Okay.
point is that it's not as big, it's not as dramatic a change as like New York to Florida or
Yeah,
California.
like, what are you gonna
to
do? You
Texas.
gonna move to Red Deer, save on taxes?
Hey, how dare you? There's good
Rick,
people.
Rick from Red Deer.
We have
What
one
about
listener in Red Deer.
what about Saskatchewan? Saskatchewan would be.
You know what I mean? No,
very-
it's like, I don't know. And then you look at the States, like the places you can go. I mean, the optionality that you have. And I always find that very interesting because we talk about like housing a lot. And, you know, you look at like people always compare like US housing chart versus Canada housing chart. They go, oh my God, it's crazy. But it's like, yeah, if you look at the Canada home price index, 70% of that is just the GTA and Vancouver because everybody funneled into these two major metros because that's where the jobs and the economic opportunity are. But it's like if you're in the States, you can just kind of bop around. And everybody, what I've noticed just from Americans is that it's so common for them just to move from like state to state. Like, oh, I got a job opportunity, you know, wherever, and I'm moving.
There's actually loads of research on this. This called like mobility, like labor force mobility, and how in Canada it's nowhere near as strong as in America. There's a bunch of reasons for that.
But Rich, think about sorry to interrupt you, but think about Canada's
go.
like tier 2 cities, which is
there
like
are none.
Yeah, it's like okay, you're gonna go to like, well, I don't know, like what's the population of Victoria? I think it's 100,000 or something, just over 100,000.
Whatever. I mean, even if
That's
it was
like
more,
that's a small remote town in the United States.
Yeah.
And like that's
that would, if I was prime minister, that's something I would focus on. I'd focus on trying to build these second cities. But you know, Keith, your point is actually really interesting. I'm surprised like a province like PEI hasn't been like, you know what, 0 corporate taxes, and just like attract and just try to steal as much, corporations from the rest of the province or something like that. I don't know.
I think you need to exclude. You need to exclude PEI because from it's a very small. They do not have the infrastructure.
Fine,
and they don't want it. Yeah, they don't want that
Fine.
kind of stuff.
They don't want corporations.
They have a very successful, farming, fishing industry. Like it's enormous over there, of course. The last thing they want is, hundreds of people coming in. They don't want that. But if you make, I know people will at me for this, but if you're making significant income in Canada, say you're 500 and above, something like that, and it's out there, right? It's not unusual. Making a move from a high tax province to a lower tax province, you're not saving a few $1,000s. Like you're saving tens of thousands of dollars with that. And the other way to look at it, okay, I'm saving the money, but the other way to look at it is what value are you getting for those additional taxes?
Yeah.
And of course, then do you want to work harder? Is it worth it? And I know that's happening. So the guy that left California, he decided, yeah, I'm going to continue to work hard because I just built this $1 billion company. However, I've had enough of getting nothing in return out of California for it. So I'm going to, move to Nashville. So mobility, worker mobility, corporate mobility, it's all about attracting capital all the time. And it's always going to exist. So I think that's one way you compete within a country and one country with the other.
Resh, it's almost like these no state income tax NHL teams.
Yeah. I wonder
there's been a Keith, I don't know, you're probably not plugged into this as well as Rich and I are. There's this huge sort of like ongoing debate in the hockey world, which is to say that all the last 5-6 Stanley Cup winners have been like no state income tax teams, essentially, where they're signing all these good players at discounts because the players know they're saving, $1 million a year in taxes. And when you're in a salary cap era, it makes a big difference. And now the NHL apparently is deliberating and debating about how to approach this sort of, like, think about it. If you're in like, if you're an NHL team and you're the Toronto Maple Leafs competing against the Florida Panthers, I mean, like the tax rates between those two teams.
So I assume the response for this is to penalize the Florida teams instead of lifting the ability for the Toronto team to spend more.
So I mean,
but it's the same thing in like American football has the same challenge. Yeah. Of course, yeah, like the California, if you're employed. So the way it works with football, by the way, you get paid, you get a game check. And depending on where the game is, you have to pay state taxes for that week.
I think that's how it works.
It's the same. It is the same. It is the same. And also there's deferred taxation. So a lot of these guys will defer their taxes defer their income until after they retire and then move to a low tax jurisdiction. So this is very,
Rich, to
very
the point,
boring
right? If you're
podcast talk. We're basically
if
discussing
you're playing for the
tax
Florida
law.
Panthers, you're playing 41 games in,
Yeah.
in the state of Miami's.
Right. But if you're in the Canadians, if you're on the Canadians and you're gonna win the Stanley Cup next year, you're playing, 4 or 5 games in Tampa and Florida and Dallas and Nashville, etc. So
And we've really derailed this conversation.
yeah, but wait, what you were talking about a couple minutes ago, Steve, reminded me a really important quote that my old boss at the hedge fund, not as good as boss as Keith, obviously, but pretty close. His name's Julian, and he said about this taxing and about not wanting to work, etc. And he's a British lawmaker, and it's really important, I think. And the quote is, "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the people discover that they can vote themselves largesse out of the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority will always vote for the candidate promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy followed by a dictatorship." Sorry, I know that was long, but his name is Alexander Fraser Tidler. Anyways, whatever. But
Say that again. What was his name?
Tickler?
I don't know how to say his last name, but he was like a very
I've heard that
writer.
one before. It's very
yeah,
true.
You might have. He's from the 1700s, mid 1700s, and he was a thinker and a judge, and he's Scottish. But anyways, jokes aside, I think it's a really interesting point, and it really brings home a lot of the different discussions that we've talked about.
And it ties in with the Fraser Institute. Maybe we can put that chart up here as well.
Yeah.
That main one.
But it's all related.
It's figure three chart for everyone.
But Keith, it's related to what you said, which is like we're into the cycle. It's related to what Steve said, which is like, the taxes are already very high and rising. And it's related to what I said, which is like federal or public employment is really, really high. And who did they vote for? The guy who promised not to fire them, basically.
Yeah, but like think about like, I don't know, I always find it very interesting. This is sort of like me spewing off here, but if you look at like ultimately what is happening here is you have the government comes in with these fiscal spending, essentially creating money. You have the central bank helping with that debasement. So you debase the currency, you inflate the cost of everything, and then you charge people taxes on top of that, on top of those inflated prices to essentially maintain the system. And then people wonder why they're not getting ahead anymore. It's like you think about even your stocks that are going up in value. I mean, how much of those stocks increasing is just the debasement of the currency, the nominal growth. And obviously, and you say, well, adjusted for inflation, what's the real return? Once again, I would argue that CPI is a manipulated number to begin with.
Yeah, but sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say, but that's what's Mr. Tidler. But his point is that the descent into dictatorship is a real fear, and that's because when inflation is a killer for societies. It was a killer for the Romans. It was a killer for the Ottoman Empire. It was a killer for, you know what I mean? Like throughout history, you just cannot get your inflation in. You get these populist regimes that come in, and then, we've seen the populism on the right and on the left try to give people simple answers to this question, and it ends in tears. And so that's why I think it's a really interesting kind of, I don't know.
Remember when we RIP, I feel like it was so long ago now, but when the central bank effectively held rates at zero for over a decade, and Janet Yellen, who was the Fed chair at the time, said, inflation was the problem of our lifetimes, which is to say they couldn't generate 2%. So they decided to keep rates at zero. They decided to keep rates at zero because inflation CPI was 1.8, not 2.0. And, meanwhile, everybody that was living day to day clearly saw, inflation wasn't 1.8%, maybe for TVs, but, the cost of shelter was going up 10% a year. The cost of living in any major metro was enormous.
Private schools, like anything asset related or interest rate sensitive, was ripping. Yeah.
One of my favorite books. I don't know if you guys ever read it. It's called When Money Dies. Have you ever read that?
I can read that.
think who's the author? Who's the writer?
God, I don't remember. Anyways, it's called When
Adam
Money
Ferguson.
Is it the Scottish guy? The
Tiddler.
yeah.
When Money Dies.
I'm
It's
looking at it
on
right
the,
now. Yeah, Adam
on the
Ferguson.
Yeah, it's on the German hyperinflation. So basically it really just talks about like the stories at the time, how quickly money was spent, sort of like all of the signs of just like the currency was dying, but like it's interesting because like, wow, wasn't this like so obvious to like the German people, and like the vast majority of the population had no idea what was going on. It was like the smart business people that like saw what was happening, started buying companies, and obviously, hedging and protecting their assets or protecting their wealth. And it was just basically just people just got destroyed. And I feel just so many similarities today, like running these massive QE programs, interest rates at zero, massive deficit spending. And like, you just look at now today, right? The cost of housing, not just in Canada, but the US and other Western democracies. It's, I think it's pretty plain as day.
I mean, the main trigger point though for what happened in Germany back then, they got shut out of funding markets.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would lend to them anymore. That's why they had to start printing money. So for today, for our country and all the rest of the West, we can still borrow. It's still happening. So when people say, "Oh, when will this kind of event happen? Why do you think it's a challenge?" As of right now, today, we can still borrow. So the next step is going to be more expensive to borrow, and then the step after that is you can't borrow. Right, that's the logical progression that we're going towards. And you're absolutely right, Steve. I mean, that's what happened with the Italians back, what was it, 12 years ago now, maybe. Same with the Greeks and everyone else. So that's the key.
Two-year bond yields were like 20. I think they hit like 20% or something like that. I can't remember exactly the number, but it was crazy. Imagine that.
Yeah, but I think though for Italy, didn't they go from like 4 to 6 to 10%, very, very quickly.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So as long as you're able to borrow, I mean, if you're able to borrow at 10%, if you knew you could double your money, you would pay 50% to borrow.
Oh, I screwed up the number.
Yep.
2-year bond yields were like 8%, but still, it's still.
Yeah. I know they wraps it up, but people will pay whatever it takes to borrow if they're confident that they're going to make money on it. But borrow may also mean someone else is lending you money. And if you're going to lend, a country your money and you feel you may not get it back, or, something funny will happen with it, then you're not going to lend them money. So that's the next step. We're not there yet, of course, everyone, but is the next step to look for.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good place to wrap it up. As always, appreciate the support. Hopefully you found the conversation today enjoyable. We always appreciate your feedback, suggestions, etc. So feel free to send us an email. As Rich said, keep it short. There's a Loonie Hour website, looneyhour.ca, where you can go and supply your feedback, as well as the YouTube comments there. But as always, we ask that you share this episode with at least one friend or family member, and we'll see you next week.